Good morning, everyone. This is Scott from Asian University, Taiwan. So today I will talk a little bit about willingness to communicate, aka WTC, something familiar to you, right? But actually, I'm going to talk something different about it. Okay, so in this study with Dr. Seong Lee from the Education University of Hong Kong, we try to contextualize willingness to communicate among Taiwanese EFL students in face-to-face and also digital settings. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. So in the following presentation, I'm going to start with research background. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about willingness to communicate and then move on to WTC in a second language, or let's say L2 WTC. Okay, and then I'll try to highlight the research gaps and also research questions that actually guided the study. And then with research background being informed, I will move on to detailed information such as methods, okay, that actually include the participants, the context, the instrument, and also data analysis, data collection and data analysis, okay. And then based on the data we collected, I try to present you the findings of the study and then try to attach meaning to it, what it means by that, okay, so in the discussion section. And then I try to I'll provide you with some kind of pedagogical implications. And of course, later on, we will move on to the conclusion of the study. Okay, so first thing first, what is willingness to communicate, WTC? So according to McCroskey and Baer, 1985, so it's actually a personality-based trait-like predisposition, which is fairly consistent across a variety of communication contexts and types of receivers. Okay, so McCroskey and his associates actually developed and validated the original WTC scale that actually include the following 4 sections. Okay, so the first one is reticence, and then the second one will be unwillingness to communicate and predispositions toward verbal behavior, and lastly, talk about shyness. Okay, so this is the elements included in WTC. But when we talk about WTC in a second language, actually it's much more complicated, okay? So according to Mike Intile et al., so 1998, it's actually, when we talk about L2, WTC is a readiness to enter into the discourse at a particular time with a specific person or persons using L2, okay? So if you take a look at the pyramid of WTC, to your right, okay, so as you can see, it got a lot of layers, okay, so starting from layer 1 to layer 6, okay, so but if you take a look at layer 1 and layer 2, so in this heuristic model, so layer 1 and layer 2, they are communication, behavior, and behavioral intentions. They are not actually influences, okay, so they are the so-called post-influence actions. So layer 1 is actual L2 use, and layer 2 is the commitment to L2 use. That is willingness to communicate. Okay, and then if you look down to layer 3 to layer 6, okay, so they are more fluid in upper layers. Okay, so for example, if you take a look at layer 3 and layer 5, layer 4, they are more fluid, and then for layer 5 and layer 6, they are more solid. Okay, so for example, layer 3, box 4, state communicative self-confidence. Okay, so it actually deals with L2 learners' confidence of being able to communicate effectively in a situation by situation basis. Okay, and then if you take a look at layer 5, box 12, okay, so personality. So it's actually more of a permanent or fixed trait. Okay, so as you can see, L2 WTC or WTC in the second language is actually very, very complicated. Okay, so with that, because of its complexity, so there has been research on L2 WTC. Okay, so for example, some researchers have talked about individual trait-like WTC. For example, they talk about motivation, self-confidence, and L2 anxiety. Okay, but for others, they talk about situated and dynamic WTC. So it's actually a combination of individual trait-like and also contextual state-like factors. Okay, so for example, as you can see from Penn 2012, and then also Yashima et al. 2018. Okay. So based on the research review, based on the examination of previous studies, we have found the research gaps. Okay, so L2WTC studies focus little on digital settings. Okay, so previous studies have focused more on face-to-face settings or context. For example, they talk about L2WTC inside the classroom and also outside the classroom. But as we can see, with the development of technology, we try to, as students, as learners, or as language users are using language in the digital space. We try to, there's something that needs to be examined. Okay, but L2WTC studies focus little on digital settings, and also little is known about what factors may have influence once L2WTC in face-to-face and also digital settings. Okay. So that's the research gaps. And with this gap, okay, to solve the problems, okay, so we try to formulate 2 research questions. Okay, so the first one is, to what extent do Taiwanese EFL students differ in their levels of L2WTC in class, out of class, and digital settings? So we try to compare their levels of WTC in the following 3 settings, and also what factors may have influenced their levels of L2WTC. Okay, so then let's move on to the methods. Okay, so first we talk about participants. So we got to, in this study, 261 students from 1 private university in central Taiwan participated. Okay, so it's around 32% were females, and then 68% were males. Okay, and then among those 261 students, okay, so for freshmen, it's more like accounted for 60%, and for sophomores, 30%, and then the junior, and also senior, respectively accounted for 8% and also 2%. Okay, and then based on their majors, okay, so the 70% are from the humanities. From the humanities. Okay, so 8% from engineering, and then 14% from the science field, and for other disciplines accounting for 8%. So that's the basic demographic information of the participants. Then we talk about the context. Okay, so since we are going to talk about WTC among Taiwanese EFL students, so we try to talk about the specific English context, okay, or L2 context in that specific university. Okay, so for that university, for that private university in central Taiwan, it provides some EMI courses. Okay, so English medium instruction courses, and then even for those courses, they are more monolingual oriented, because the fact is that there were not many international students in taking the courses. Okay, and then but the university actually provided a few cross-cultural events, for example, an international friendship body. Okay, and then students. So with this more monolingual oriented courses, and also just a few cross-cultural events, so you can imagine students actually don't have sufficient exposure to L2 input unless taking those EMI courses. Okay, so and then although students' exposure to L2 input is limited, right? So some teachers have tried to think about using technology to facilitate to help students to develop or build willingness to communicate with people from different cultures. Okay, so there has been using technology enhanced language learning and flipped learning to enhance students' L2 communicative behaviors and productive skills such as speaking and writing. So that's the basic context of the study. And then let's move on to the instrument. Okay, so to collect students' information about their willingness to communicate in class out of class and also digital settings, right? So we try to use an L2 WTC questionnaires for to measure students WTC in 3 cumulative contests. Okay, so originally we got an 8-item 2-factor model developed in Japanese and Chinese EFL settings. Okay, so it's L2 WTC in class and also out of class contests. So since we try to compare students WTC also in the digital settings, so we added 4 new items. Okay, so right now we got 12 items, and then after running the exploratory factor analysis, we finalize 11 items, 3-factor structure of the L2 WTC questionnaire. Okay, so as you can see, we got WTC IC. So inside the classroom, we got 4 items to measure this one. We got WTC OC outside the classroom, 3 items. And then we got WTC DS. So that's their willingness to communicate in digital settings. Okay, so another 4 items. So together, even 11 items. So here's the questionnaire that I just mentioned. It's a 5-point Likert scale. So starting from 1, definitely not willing, to 5, definitely willing. So for example, if you take a look at WTC IC1, so inside the classroom, so when you are given a chance to talk freely in an English class, okay, so we try to ask students what's their perceptions about the extent to which they are willing to talk or they are willing to communicate when they are given a chance to talk freely in an English class. Okay, and also another example from WTC, for example, WTC OC, okay, outside the classroom. So when you find a friend standing before you in a line, would you try to communicate with them in English? Okay. And then one example from WTC DS1. Okay, so let's in digital settings. So when you chat with non-native speakers of English, for example, Koreans, Japanese, or Chinese on Facebook, so the extent to which you are willing to communicate with them in English. Okay, so based on these 11 items, we try to collect students' responses. We try to see what they are thinking about of their willingness to communicate in the following 3 context, right? And with in addition to the students' responses to a questionnaire, we try to use follow-up and also semi-structured interviews with 20 Taiwanese students. So we try to pinpoint or observe or identify factors that actually influence their WTC in the 3 settings. Okay, so that's the instrument. For data analysis, of course, for the first one, to what extent do Taiwanese EFL students differ in their level of L2 WTC in class, out of class, and digital settings? Okay, so we use descriptive statistics. And then for factors that may have influenced their levels of L2 WTC, we try to identify the recurring themes from their oral responses. Okay, so now let's take a look at the results. Okay, so first one, L2 WTC levels. So the students, as you can see from the construct, WTC IC, the mean score 2.86, WTC OC out of class, so it's around 3.2. For WTC DS, so in digital settings, so their willingness to communicate, okay, is around 3.5. Okay, so as you can see from the results, the students actually score higher on L2 WTC in the digital setting, okay, as you can judge by the higher mean scores, okay, while show lower responses to L2 WTC inside the classroom settings, okay. So that's the basic idea of their L2 WTC levels in 3 settings. Then with students' interviews, we can actually pinpoint factors actually affecting their L2 WTC, right? So first, if you take a look at L2 WTC inside the classroom, okay, so what we found from students' responses is that they have mentioned constantly about L2 speaking anxiety and also group cohesiveness. Okay, so if you take a look at this one, so for example, one student say that I do not want to make mistakes and lose face in front of other classmates. Okay, so that's speaking anxiety, right? So I often wait until I am asked to speak by a teacher. So he waits until he was forced to do that. Okay, so his willingness to communicate actually was confined by his speaking anxiety. Okay, and also I think another student responded, I think the classroom vibe influences me a lot. So if my classmates are quiet and not really active in learning activities, I tend to remain the same. Okay, so he actually tried to focus more on cohesiveness of the group. Okay, so if they are performing like that way, I will do the same. Unless they are doing something different, then probably I will change accordingly. Okay, so that's the factors affecting the L2 WTC inside the classroom. Then we move on to L2 WTC outside the classroom. So we in this one I try to we try to direct your attention to the school's English environment. Okay, so one student said that I feel as though living in an English immersive environment in the dormitory. So my roommate and closest dorm friends are all international students, and we use English for communication in the room lounge at all time. Okay, so that's the English environment provided by the university that actually help them to build up their willingness to communicate. Okay, L2, willingness to communicate. And then another student say that I'm working part-time in a restaurant near the campus. So many international students and also professors came to the restaurant. So I often explain the menu in English. I do not feel nervous about speaking English in the restaurant. Okay, so again, that's the English environment, the school's English environment. Okay, and then the last one is L2 WTC in digital settings. Okay, so we try to direct your attention to teaching practice and also teachers' meta-cognitive instructional behavior. So for example, my teacher always encourages me to make friends with foreign speakers on social media. So when I talk to other users of English, I feel English is not just a subject to master, but more like a tool for me to enter the global village. Okay, so always encourages the student to do something extra, right? So that's the teaching practice. How about the meta-cognitive instructional behavior by the teacher? So the teacher encourages me to make good use of online resources as language facilitators. So the teacher even demonstrates how he engages in language exchange with a native English speaker on Facebook. Okay, so by setting an example, the teacher actually demonstrates how L2 WTC can be initiated, can be improved, or can be enhanced. Okay, so that's the factors affecting the L2 WTC in digital settings. Okay, and then of course, based on this, based on the findings or based on the students' responses, we can actually think more about the implications in in-class settings. So it actually for example, you got to think about opportunities that allow students to choose their own topics and also work with international students. Okay, so if you want students to talk, you need to think about what topics they find interesting. Okay, and then what kind of stuff they can work with international students. And also for the teacher, try to create a positive classroom environment in which students can take linguistic risks but feel safe. Okay, and then out of class, try to create an L2 rich environment. So for example, you can actually make good use of intercultural programs such as study program, English corners, and intercultural extramural activities such as sports events that actually encourage or engage students in communicating with international students. And also try to set up some kind of intensive EFL immersion programs. Okay, then about digital settings. Okay, so incorporate digital games, CMC. Okay, so computer mediated communication and social media as part of learning activities. So try to make the learning process more diverse, more interesting, and also encourage students to befriend and interact with other English users on social media, and also try to demonstrate how technology can be integrated into L2 communication. Okay, so that's the implications. Then So as you can see from the results, so actually EFL learners can become more willing to communicate when sufficient opportunities for English use are provided through instructional and institutional support. Okay, so in the following, back to what we have just talked about. So in class setting, out of class setting, and also in digital settings. So you can actually create a environment that actually boost or foster students' willingness to communicate in foreign languages, right? So of course, for future directions, you need a clear distinction among in-class, out-of-class, and also digital settings. Okay, and also for this study, you for future studies, try to maintain equal selection of informants by recruiting participants from equivalent demographic backgrounds. Okay, and also think about a revision of the current L2 WTC scale to encompass oral and written communicative behavior items equally in both non-digital and also digital settings. Okay, so final words. So according to McCroskey and Richmond, 1990, so there is a major need to generate data from additional cultural groups in order to widen our base for comparisons. So to make recommendations for improving interaction between cultures with different as well as similar communication orientations. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. So if you got any questions, so please don't hesitate to ask me. Thank you.